Hi, my name is Ashley. I'm going to be delivering a session today on Unit 516, which is on the Level 5 programme, which is about analysing and interpreting statistics to inform of management decisions. So the aim of this session is to analyse how to define a problem and use statistical analysis to make decisions or to make informed changes within an organisation to improve a specific situation. So let's start by defining what we mean by problem. So the Oxford Dictionary defines it as a matter or situation regarded as unwelcome or harmful and needing to be dealt with and overcome. I think that's difficult to achieve, basically. So that definition of a problem allows us to consider, okay, how can we look at our organisation as a whole, see where problems lie and see how we can go about analysing that problem to find solutions. Now, often is the case that you will need to pull information or pull data in order to be able to get to the depth of a problem in itself. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So in the first question within Unit 516, and basically when looking at any sort of problem, you can consider it from a couple of different directions. And you can look at it from, what the managers are communicating to you. You can look at it from any sort of customer relationship management systems, from feedback systems, monitoring techniques. You might even be able to find them problems from artificial intelligence or, Google Analytics, or from product returns and the feedback that you're getting in relation to them product returns. You might be able to find them workplace problems from keeping records or through observation, or any sort of quality audits that you have and feedback that's being given from them quality audits. So depending on industry and depending on the department in which you work in will depend on how you are going to define your complex workplace problem. So problem finding is a critical thinking process in which the person articulates an idea that should be addressed, a question that needs to be answered, a hypothesis that should be analysed, or an issue that just needs to be solved. So problem analysis is different. Problem finding can be thought of as a creative process. And, you often do need to have a strong skill for critical thinking when problem finding. But problem analysis also involves, critical thinking, but it's about looking deep into a problem to resolve it. So to finding exactly what that problem is, the solution will need to address the root cause or the symptoms or both. An example could be if we had, say, if we had a complainant, so somebody who's complaining, who's presenting a defect problem with one of our products, by giving them a replacement, we will probably be addressing the symptoms and making sure that the cause of the defect was eradicated. We'd be more addressing the root cause. So you can consider there's two ways to, you've got your problem analysis, but there's two ways to resolve a problem. You've got like the rational process, which looks at a logical and organized sequence of events to be able to resolve that problem. And then you've got your creative, which breaks conventions really, and it usually takes a bit of a leap of faith when thinking creatively to resolve problems. So what we're going to be focusing on today is for this unit, is the rational and organised methods of resolving complex work problems using data analysis. So problem analysis, I'm just going to point you in the direction of one of the ways to solve a problem. And this just breaks down and asks you some questions about it. So, consider getting to the root of the problem and the issue by thinking, firstly, okay, what is happening here? Okay. Then collecting some data or evidence that the problem exists. So you might want to look at that from a qualitative, so gaining some perspectives from the staff, maybe getting questionnaires sent out and getting the perspectives from that point of view. Or you might want to, gain perspective from a quantitative data collection method, and that might be, sending, it's just monitoring maybe a customer relationship management system to be able to see if there's any trends in customer buying, for example. But what you need to consider here within this unit is collecting data over a period of time, and that's called time series, and we're going to look into that in a little bit more detail in a minute. So you want to then be able to identify the possible causes. So what led to the problem? What other causes could link to that? So you might want to think about doing some sort of critical analysis in relation to maybe a fishbone analysis, where you're thinking about different causes that could have led to the main cause of the problem. And then think about why the causes exist. And then when we'll be moving into the ends of this presentation, we will be looking at how you can implement solutions. So the what, how, who, and by when, to communicating them changes over. So I'm just going to break learning outcome 1 into 4 sections, because it is quite a difficult one, especially if you've not used statistical tools before to analyze data to come to a solution to a problem. So let's just break this down into 4 categories. So firstly, we're going to be looking at finding and focusing on that complex workplace problem. So problem finding, problem analysis, in order to be able to gather some evidence to then be able to analyze the data. Okay, so you're going to be collecting and organizing that relevant data using either time series or index numbers. We're going to be going on to that in just a minute, so don't worry about that. Then you're going to be thinking about applying at least one appropriate statistical tool to be able to analyze them numbers in that time series data. And then you're going to be testing for possible relationships between the data as well, in order to be able to then make informed decisions for learning outcome 2, sorry. So finding and focusing on that complex workplace problem is going to be probably the most difficult part of this. And what we need to think about is variables. So the value of a variable such as sales will change over time due to a number of factors. It could be weather, it could be, obviously variables in the last couple of years will be crazily different than to the trajectories from like years ago or for future because of COVID and the impact it's had on shops closing. But think about the value of variables. So let's just think about sales, because everyone probably understands sales in the matter of buying and if not selling. So it will change over time due to different factors. For example, seasons like Christmas, for example. So a company might be even expanding the market for a new product, hence there will be an upward movement in the sales of the product as time progresses. So they might add on more products to their sales catalog, for example, and the value of the amount of sales will change over time. And if, for example, the value of them sales is going up, that will increase, and that's actually seen as, or it might decrease, and that's seen as the trend. So you can see a trend within the data based on the variables that you're pulling from that. So when you are, when you are looking at the data and pulling data, you want to consider the variables, but you also want to consider different ways of collecting that data. And we've talked about quantitative, we've talked about qualitative, but you've got to consider which way is best for you to be able to pull that data, and then think about what you're actually going to do with that data. So different data collection methods are, you might be, observing, just observing and taking some notes and being able to take on how often people are doing this or how often people are doing that in relation to your customers or clients. You might have software simulation, which is, so relevant right now, with technology and the implementation of so many different statistical and analytical tools with different software. This is being used more and more in marketing and sales, and for people to predict trends. Because you've got to consider, when you are getting the data, what are you going to be using the data for? You're going to be using it to clean. You want to clean that data in order to be able to understand that data, in order to maybe forecast what's going to happen in the future. So you can use instruments such as frequency counters, which allows you to count the movement of products or people. Artificial intelligence, such as Google Analytics, or, there's even more for social media now that can be used in all different avenues. Mobile phone applications can measure, the movement of people in relation to sales, or, how they're buying products and the behavior. And then wireless telemetry, it uses radio frequency communication. So an example could be to measure pulse or respiration of a patient. So, you might be able to gather data such as, if you wanted to know the variables in, say, a diabetic patient and the height and the weight, you could pull data from a wireless telemetry to be able to, and maybe use a software simulation as well, to be able to pull that data to see if there's any trends there. So we're going to break down a little bit more about data, but just remember what we said in relation to variables and pulling data. Now, when you consider time series, you've got to consider how you're going to interpret that data in a time series, okay? So what you should be considering is that, time series in data analysis is a collection of data points organised over time. So it could be over months, over years, it could be quarterly. According to some definitions, the data points in time series should be equally spaced, although that's not always the case. Think about it as an ordered sequence of values of a variable at equal space and time intervals. And some of the examples here might be able to help you with with further examples, so they can be used for sales forecasting. So you might be able to look at, how many pair of boots were sold in January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September. And you might be able to see that there's a trend that maybe in the winter months, the sales for boots go up, for example. Inventory studies, you might be looking at the stock intake that you have and whether you need that stock to be there at a specific time periods. So you could use it for that. And, a lot of people do use this for stock and inventory management because, consider how much it costs to hold the resources that you actually have. If you can predict when you're going to need it, and then you'll have the space for that stock, then that will only help in the management of your resources. Process and quality control, yield projections, workload projections, budgetary analysis is quite common for the use of time series. I'm going to give you a couple of examples which might be able to allow you to think about it from more of a general perspective. So A data set compares the performance of athletes, for example. So the performance of the athletes to their height. Since neither the performance of the athletes nor their height relates to time, this is not a time series by any definition. A data set that compares the weather in a time to readings taken at random times of the year. Since time is one of the variables, but the intervals between the data points are not evenly spaced, this may or not be a time series depending on the chosen definition. A data set compares the weather in a time to readings taken at the same time every month. Since time is one of the variables and the intervals between the data points are evenly spaced, say 1 month apart, this is time series by all definitions. So think about them different examples and think about the variables and how them sets can be compared as well. So any data set up which uses time as an independent variable, any data set where values of a variable have been collected, recorded, or observed, or over a successive periods of time, so days, week, or months, can be seen as time series. Just let me give you one other example of time series, and one that I think a lot of people can sort of consider. If you think about, say, global warming, for example, there might be a measurement of the percentage of increase of, carbon emissions over a specific amount of time to be able to predict, how that's going to be continued on if we stay doing all the same things. So if all of the variables are exactly the same, then you will be able to predict future events. But think about that as a point of how that can be done and how that data can be pulled out as well. So moving on to index numbers. An index number measures the relative variation in price, could be quality, value, or some other item of interest from one time period to another. So index numbers are used to measure all types of qualitative changes in agricultural, industrial, and commercial fields, such as the economical magnitudes of like income, employment, export, import, prices. Through an investigation of these changes, it assists that they actually assist the government really on looking at the fairness of the fairness of growth and the financial measures in order to accomplish growth with fairness. So they might look at the inflation really, and then they might up people's cost of living, or the minimum wage based on that. So they do use gov.uk. I've got a huge list that's open to the public of index numbers that they use, and index numbers are used as an indicator to indicate changes in that economic activity. They can also provide a framework for decision making and to predict the future events. So I've noted down the 3 different areas here: quality index, price index, and value index, but they can be used in more areas than that. And what you need to consider is there's always a base year to go from. So index numbers are used to measure changes and simplify comparisons, but the base year is always standard as 100. So an example of that might be in subsequent years, percentage increases. If we were to look at, say, house prices from 2008, for example, you might say that that the base year is 2008, and you're wanting to figure out how much additional from 2008 to 2020 the house prices have gone up. So you might see in 2009, 2010, it might be 102, 106, 108. So by 2010, you've got a 10% increase based on your index number measurement. So it is seen in a lot of different areas. But yeah, I mean, you can look at a lot of reports on gov.uk relating to index numbers. And it's important to be able to see the variation in one different variable as well. So let's talk about how you can break time series down. So there's 3 different ways to break down time series, and you could use auto correlation, which is the tendency of data, observations and patterns to repeat themselves over time. And if these observations and patterns repeat themselves at like regular intervals, then that can be seen as seasonality. Stationality is a measure of how little a time series mean, and the variance changes over time. So an example is if the temperature measured across a period of 10 years of a similar magnitude and variance after accounting for the seasonality of the data set, then the time series will be said to have high stationality. So you can use 3 of them interchangeably to be able to look at the value of the set of data that you've actually got, to then be able to provide you with definitions and ideas to make decisions on that time series. So that's an example of how you could use the time series and break it down into 3 different categories in order to make some informed decisions. An example here is based on the index numbers. So this one is the average earnings in different sectors and how they've changed between the year 2000 and the year 2006. So the index numbers for each sector is taken as 100 from, so basically the base year is in 2000, okay? And the values in the later years are based around this value, okay? So this is a simple way to compare the way in which each earnings in each sector have changed over a period of time. And it's usual to use a table format, but you could then change this and use a different interpretation to present your data. So for an example, in 2006, average earnings in agriculture were 32.7% higher than in 2000. So you can break it down a little bit and you can compare and you can, add and subtract to be able to find a percentage value comparing each. Now, you can also look at the percentage change from year. So you can look at year, say A to B, and there's an equation that can be used for that where you can break it down even further. I mean, as you can probably imagine, the equations would lead to some, really, really big mathematical equations, but will also be able to give you defined answers in that data analysis as well. So you can have a little look at this in a little bit more detail and the equations and how to create the sums to analyze the data. And there's plenty more examples as well within the resources section in Moodle. So let's think about variance measurements and how we can, measure the variables within your data set. Now, first, let's start by defining that, a set of data might be presented in a single value, and it may also be in, there might be two data sets that you can compare, and there might even be 3. So depending on that is how you're going to basically measure the variance of your data set. You might have commonly in the past used, so say for example, we were measuring over like every single day what we wanted to do our time series over a year. We might want to find an average of say every month to be able to then work out some trends in the months. And how you do that is by creating an average. Now, the correct mathematical term in data analysis used for this is arithmetic mean or just mean, but you can create that average in a couple of different ways by actually doing, adding them all and dividing it by how many there is to actually work out the mean. You can look at creating an average by doing a mode calculation, which looks at the most common number. And you might even want to put all of your data in ascending order to find the middle value, to find the median. And considering that the idea of variance of a set of data aims to quantify how much the data varies from a central point. So you're looking at, you need to find that average to be able to work out the time series and how you're going to do it. You might want to just do it quarterly and do it over 4 periods of time. So then you might want to find out, you might even want to find out if you're looking at it maybe from a HR perspective, for example, and you've got, this is what I've done in the past. You may have, a really high staff retention, and you might want to analyze and really look into that problem and figure out, okay, well, why is my staff retention? Well, why are people coming and going so quickly? You might come to the realization that it's because a lot of the people that are being recruited for that sales post are young individuals that are maybe in between jobs, and maybe the job advertisement that we had at that time was focusing more on that generation. So what we did is we looked at how many people were going over what time, and we compared that to the age rate of the person. And then we considered, well, what if we change the wording in our job advertisements in order to be able to cater to not just younger individuals, but to more of a broader range of candidates. And then being able to advertise and and be seen more by that wider candidate range, we could then hire more people and be able to then more people from different age groups, and then maybe we could look at analysing the trends going forward or the time series to look at the different variables. And you don't even need to look at it just from that perspective. If you look at HR, you could look at it from a number of different perspectives. But firstly, you've got to start by analysing the problem to get to that root cause, to then be able to see, well, what data can I actually review over a set period of time in order then to be able to clean that data, to understand that data, to then be able to forecast that data in order to make informed decisions. So, when you're looking at data and you might have it in a table format, you might have it in a graph, you might have it in a histogram, you might have it in a line diagram, you might have it in a scatter graph. There's a number of different uses and a number of different ways that you can analyze information by using different visual aids to be able to demonstrate what your data means, what your data set looks at. And it is, useful to be able to portray it in the right way in order to pull out the right information, to be able to see projections for the future as well. Also, with this unit, for learning outcome 2, you're going to be looking at how you can interpret them results to inform of management decisions. So you need to be informing how you're going to be able to implement them decisions. You don't necessarily have to implement it as part of this unit, but you need to demonstrate how you would implement something in order to be able to improve the results that are being generated from your statistical analysis of that specific problem. So you're finding the problem, you're analysing the problem, you're reviewing the data from that problem. You'll be able to analyse that data either using time series or index numbers. You can then use different statistical tools to be able to help you clean, understand and forecast that data, to then be able to look at how you can evidence how a change is going to be beneficial to solve that problem. So you will definitely 100% in this unit be having to add information and evidence as an appendix, whether that's, a table of a breakdown of your data, and your time series analysis could be portrayed in a different visual tool. You will be having to plan or propose the aim and objectives for how you are going to be making that change. You are going to be having to inform how you're going to implement that plan to management, your team, whoever needs to be informed. And you will be having to, and learning outcome to, inform how you're going to be able to present that information so everybody understands it, and informing as well how you're going to be able to communicate that plan for change. So that's more for the good pass in the last question. If you are clear about how you're going to be communicating that change, you might want to use theory to portray how you are going to be, like you might want to use Lewin's change model to elaborate on how much you are going to be having to, think about the people and the processes, the plan, the resources that are going to be needed when implementing that change. But you're also going to be having to provide a recommendation on how that decision that you've made will have a positive impact and might help to solve that problem. So remember, when thinking about this element, you're going to be thinking about your plan, you do, and your review. If you're not actually going to be doing and implementing the plan in real time, you will need to be informing of what you would do and how you would review that plan. Now, there are a number of different statistical tools that can be used to, clean, understand and forecast the data within the index numbers or the time series. And here's just a couple to name a few. Now, I'm not going to go in any of these in detail. If anyone recommends a live class on any of these different statistical tools, we will be happy to comply with that. We do have many resources on Moodle that focuses on correlation, regression, chi-square, and all of the formulas and the subsequent information that you need to help you use these tools to clean and understand and find trends in that data analysis. So that concludes my presentation on analysing and using statistical tools to make informed decisions. I hope this is helpful. Thanks for tuning in today and have a good day.